Hello, this is John Majori with MajoriOnBowie.com, and I have an extremely special two guests this morning with me, the promoters of the world's largest David Bowie fan convention, the Bowie World Fan Convention this year in Liverpool, England. I was very excited. I thought it was going to be in Liverpool, New York. I know last year was in New York City, but maybe we could convince you to bring it to upstate New York next year. Um, that's a joke. But coming up this July 26th to 28th in Liverpool, the third Bowie World Fan Convention. And I'm very, very delighted to be joined today by Mr. Liverpool himself, Dave Pichilingi, from Sound City and Modern Sky, and the originator of the David Bowie World Fan Convention idea, and also Alan Horne, who is consulting with this year's convention and is the administrator of the Bowie Fascination online community and is going to be a presenter at the convention this year. And Alan, before we go any further, I want to just thank you for allowing me to promote MajoriOnBowie.com on the Facebook platform that you administer. So thank you very much for that.
Yeah, no problem.
So why don't we jump right into it? And for those who are not familiar, why don't you tell us what is the Bowie World Fan Convention?
Shall I start, Alan? Then you can jump in.
You could do, David.
So I guess, like Alan, and probably like yourself, growing up, I was a huge Bowie fan. And it was during COVID, during lockdown, when I had a little bit more time on my hands than I normally have, let's put it that way. And so whilst I was just scrolling through the internet, I was looking at what the offer was for David Bowie in terms of the legacy of him, since his untimely death. And I noticed there was lots of events that take place around the world. But for me, at least, it felt that for somebody who had such a high aesthetic all the way through his life in everything he said and everything he did, pretty much, it felt like the offerings that were out there, for me, didn't come up to that level of aesthetic, really, and quality. And so I just got speaking to a number of people that were, Bill Z and a number of other people in the people taking care of the legacy of David Bowie, and said, look, I'm thinking of putting on another convention that would be world class and bring some of the greatest players that worked alongside David throughout his life and his career together. And I said, and more importantly, as opposed to just trying to appeal to people either my age or a little bit younger, try and bring young people to the party. Because it struck me that when Bowie did pass away, there was an awful lot of young people online who were declaring their grief and their love and their passion for him and for his work, really. And not just people who came to him via Labyrinth or stuff like that, but people who came to him even much further along the line of his career. And so I said I wanted to make it for young people as well, bringing young people to the party. And as well as that, not be too serious. Of course, celebration of his life and his legacy, but not be too serious or too constrained, and to have a bit of fun, really. So one of the things that we do that's almost become the biggest centerpiece of the Bowie World Fan Convention is the Bowie Ball, which takes place on the Saturday evening, and it just encourages people to dress up in their favorite period of Bowie and just come along, and take part in that. And we have drag queens and hosting the event. In New York, we had New York drag queens. In the UK, we have the UK drag queens hosting it, and it becomes a celebration. It becomes a great laugh. It becomes a great opportunity for people to share their love for David Bowie in a very safe and inclusive environment, as well as have a great time and have the chance of winning some amazing prizes for those that come dressed as the best, really. And so that's kind of what it's about, really. It's about having fun and not being too elitist about how much you know about David Bowie, really. You can come even if you know very little about him, but are just passionate about him and his music for whatever reason. that might be. And that leads me nicely. One of the reasons why we wanted to work with Alan and Bowie Fascination was because what I noticed was the online community that Alan has built through via Bowie Fascination is very inclusive and is very non-elitist, and so it kind of fit our philosophy and our ethos perfectly.
So it's interesting. It seems to me, and I'm interested if you've made a similar observation, that the interest in David Bowie has only grown since he passed away, and that maybe even 30 years ago when he was making music, there wasn't as much of a multifaceted interest in him and his music as there is today. Do you agree with that? And what do you think happened? Like I could phrase the question: what do you think happened on the day he died?
I'll jump in on that because I think Alan will have a lot to say about that. But I've got something to say about that just from a psychology of music point of view. I mean, I'm from Liverpool. It's a music city, and if you grew up in the 70s in Liverpool, there was a saying that the further away you got from Liverpool, the bigger the Beatles became, because nobody cared about the Beatles in the 70s. And I think that's true of any artist, really. If you look at the rise of David Bowie, arguably his undeniable rise was in the 70s. But then towards the back end of the 70s, it took a bit of a dip. And then you had another rise again via Scary Monsters and Let's Dance. And then you could argue you had another fall, really, in terms of the size of his audience and the kind of commercial value in the brand of David Bowie. And then towards the further end of his career, you saw some significant turn again, with the last two albums he made, not least Black Star. And so I think any artist, whether they be the Beatles, David Bowie, the Rolling Stones, or whoever it might be, they're not always on the ascendancy, really. The kind of interest in them does kind of ebb and flow depending on their creative output and how much they want to be in the media. But I think with David Bowie, I think when you lose an artist, it's only then that you recognize the true value, I think, of what you had and what you've lost. And I think the general outpouring of someone like Bowie when he died was such that it struck such a chord with not just people who've been fans of him all of their lives, people my age, but also much, much younger people. Alan, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, you've just hit the nail on the head in the sense of the era. It's very much era led. There was the initial 70s sort of following, who have actually pretty much mostly stuck by his side until I'd say probably a few dropped off during the 80s. But what he did do at that time, now being free from RCA and being signed to EMI, was quite literally more about money making. But what came with that was the more commercial success of Let's Dance, for example. But then jumping into the 90s, we started to end up with albums like Outside and Earthling. And again, there was a whole new following then that jumped on board, and a lot of the old fans that had decided to take a step back, they came back. They started to acknowledge that artistic peak was back. He was creating incredible music, going out on shows with the imagery part of it as well, which he was so good at during that sort of whole 70s era. So it's very much led by the era, and the younger generation dipped in and out. But since David passed, there's become that not a trend, but he's become that sort of cult hero where they're coming through university, for example, and he just seems to be a name now that he's out there, he's worth buying into, and they're discovering a whole back catalogue of music and realizing actually this isn't somebody that was just a guy with a lightning bolt. This was a guy that was setting trends, he was moving ahead, he was recording differently, he was looking differently every time he came on our TVs. So, it was an artist that was always going to contain interest for all, whatever age. And that younger generation now, like the younger generation that were there in the 70s, they're there and they're finding what he had. And in fact, they've got the glory now of being able to get the whole back catalogue in one go and then listen to it and work their way through it. Whereas the fans of that time had a lot of years waiting and getting the joys and the lows and whatever else.
So I want to ask more about the convention itself, but you both struck on how there are younger new fans, and David Bowie hasn't been with us for 8 years now. And I would imagine with a lot of the younger fans, they're discovering all the music at once. Alan, you had mentioned how um, he would acquire new fans when he went on to sort of a new phase, like with Outside or with Earthling. But now, if an 18-year-old is getting into Bowie, Space Oddity exists at the same time as Black Star. And I'm wondering if either of you are sensing that the new fans of Bowie appreciate the music in a different way. And I'm kind of thinking about how it seemed often like Bowie would do a couple great albums and then he'd change his style, and there'd be both a sense of disappointment and he would lose some fans, and then he'd pick up some fans as well. How are you experiencing new fans' appreciation for him and just having everything all at once?
Yeah, well, they're being treated in a sense because, as I say, I mean, there was a lot of waiting between albums. To be honest, during the 70s, Bowie fans were generally waiting a year to 2 years, and then through the 80s, it was a slower process. Other than 83, 84 with Let's Dance in Tonight, and then it was up to 87. But yeah, they've got the whole canon of work is at their disposal, and in many cases, it's an interesting one because they can dip in and out of what it is that they like, and then it may be that they switch over to something from the 90s that they can then decide that they're going to listen to. And what they'll generally find is that there's small levels of that sound and the way that he works throughout the whole sort of portfolio of work. Whereas those people that got into it in the 70s would have to wait, they'd have to get to see what was coming next. And in some cases, you know, you get Station to Station in 76 and then Low in 77. And a lot of people were sort of knocked back. You know, what's this electronic sound? But he was doing it because it interested him. And the same with Heroes. So, yeah, they've got a. I think there's a good thing. My son, for example, he's getting to like Bowie in bits and getting that opportunity, like all the youngsters, where they're getting to hear what they're getting to hear through picking up Black Star, picking up Heathen, picking up Space Oddity, going all the way back. So it's quite a nice option to have. And like myself, I mean, it was the late end of 83 when I was 10 that I started to hear things. But by that time, I had that luxury of being able to sort of dip in and out of all those 70s albums rather than chronologically, what have we got next? Do I like it? They've got, it's like they're being given the choice and they're finding some of the stuff they didn't particularly like a few months down the line, that they're getting that opportunity to dip back into it and enjoy it and jump all the way back up to the 90s and find what they love in that as well. So it's all sort of all coming into one, and they're finding what relates between them.
Yeah. So we're starting to go down the road of having a conversation about Bowie's legacy. And I'm wondering, is this the type of thing that people will get to hear about at the convention? What, other than the ball, which you mentioned, what happens at the convention? And I'm going to ask also, who are some of the other presenters?
I mean, I'll talk generally about what happens, and then Alan can give you the detail of some of the speakers that we've booked and what's going to happen. So the aim was always to have a series of things like in conversations, keynote speeches, films, marketplaces, opportunities to fans to meet each other and to trade some of the memorabilia that they may have. So all of those things have kind of grown and cultivated over the last 3 years. We'll have a series of panels that take place on all of the days. Each of the days will end with one of our keynotes. This year we're celebrating the anniversary of Diamond Dogs, so it's the year of the Diamond Dogs this year. And so a lot of our content and a lot of our speakers relate to that period, really, you know, and a kind of there's a focus on that. That's the beauty with any artist with a back catalogue like David Bowie's got. Every year's an anniversary, really, yeah. You know. So it just so happens to be the Diamond Dogs this year, you know. So it's that's kind of in a nutshell the kind of things that we're looking at this year, and I think Alan can probably talk in a little bit more detail in terms of the actual granular content around those ideas.
Yeah, there's we're accommodating everybody, and again, it's down to making sure that what we're putting out there is a lot of focus with Diamond Dogs, as mentioned, but we're also making sure that we don't have 3 days solid of Diamond Dogs. We know that it would get to a second day, and people might start to wonder, well, what about Aladdin Sane, and what about the Damn Trio, for example? So we've looked at it as a whole. It'd be very easy to just approach everybody and invite them all. It's not possible. And so what we do is we try and bring in who we feel would be appropriate for that particular convention. It's not always possible to bring in who we'd like that's related to the theme. So we have to sort of work around that. And hence why we start to reach out beyond the big names that we've got. We start to reach out to some of the authors that are out there that have released some outstanding work, Bowie books of late, such as Simon Goddard, who does the Bowie Odyssey book release, who's just done the 74 release. Perfect timing, because obviously 74 being the year that Diamond Dogs came out. We've got Leah Cardos, who again, Black Star Theory, brilliant writer. We've actually asked her also to do almost a theory on some of those Diamond Dogs songs. But when you've got the likes of Ken Scott entertaining the audience, there's never a dull moment. The guy is fascinating as working as a producer for Bowie. We've got Woody Woodmansey, one of the Spiders, who will share his amazing stories as well. Carlos Alomar, 11 Bowie albums he worked on, toured with Bowie. George Murray, who worked on 5 Bowie albums. You've got a really good range of everybody from different eras. You've got Ava Cherry, Danny Gillespie, who will have a panel and get to talk about what it was like working with Bowie in those early days. Their opinion, what room did he give for people to work with him during that time? So that the panels are very varied. They will go across the board and they will include everybody. And that also enables us to put the spotlight on some of those authors as well, and some of the photographers, Kevin Cummins, Dennis O'Regan, 2 great assets to talk to us about, capturing David, what it was like to work with him at that time. It wasn't a recording studio, but getting to see that side of it as well, which was about an album cover or whatever it may have been. We've got people like the imagery that you've got behind you. That initial piece came from Mark Wardell, the artist, who was sort of worked through from that whole sort of Blitz era, and he's becoming a more noticeable artist with incredible work. And he's going to be involved, and he's involved with regards to some of the visionary work that we've got around the Horne, as well as Nacho, who's got a great YouTube presence for his enhancement, his digital work, for his videography, and he's bringing what he brings, which is that visual side of the entertainment for the weekend. So I
think don't forget Alan Yentob, who's
absolutely Crack Tactor. We've got obviously Alan Yentob. We've done exceptionally well. I know that Dave worked hard and patiently to get hold of Alan Yentob, and we've been given the gift of having him present to do an amazing 2-hour panel to give us some of those insights about the documentary Crack Tactor, which will be hosted by Mark Wardell and Nacho. That'll be fascinating. 2 hours of talking about something that was released so long ago, and now we've got that insight from Alan, who will be present.
So I'm smiling in part because it's the lineup you've got is dazzling, and but also in particular, I don't know who I'd want to hear from more, but you mentioned Leah Cardos, and when I was reading her book and then watching the videos that she put together in promotion of the book, I couldn't stop talking about her. And in my household, whenever her name comes up, we stop, we say Leah Cardos. Oh.
Well, Leah's worked with Tony Visconti, and so again, part of the thought process is really trying to tap into what we feel is the best way of presenting these panels. And Leah, she'll be co-hosting a panel with a guy who's coming over from Melbourne in Australia, who's one of the admin of Bowie Fascination. His name's Steve Tapai Francis, who's released a book on craft work, who writes some incredible reviews on Bowie Fascination. He was coming over anyway, but what we've done is we've tapped into that. We've put Leah's Australian, so we've put the two Australians together, and they're going to be doing that panel with Ken. And Leah's production knowledge should go down exceptionally well talking with Ken Scott.
Yeah, wow. So I thus far have not been able to attend one, and I was particularly upset that I couldn't make it work last year because I live about 2.5 hours away from New York City. Have you considered broadcasting any of the panels or having an interactive online aspect of the convention?
Short answer, no. We do film things and so on, so we do have them for our own kind of, if not commercial purposes, certainly for marketing purposes and so on, and also just for legacy. But we decided not to do that. No, I think in the post-COVID world we live, we did a lot of stuff that was online during COVID, and I think the world just seemed weary and tired of things that were online post-COVID, really. So it was something that myself and our team were also weary of a little bit. So we decided to make it just part of the real world, really, and not something that's online, really. So it was very much an artistic choice rather than a commercial one, but that's the one we've gone with.
So, Dave, you are, I don't think that your name is a household name, but you are a major figure in music, and you've done an awful lot. You mentioned Liverpool's a music city. You've done an awful lot to make that so. Everybody knows the Beatles, but you have put together Sound City, and I'm wondering if part of the answer to the question that you just gave me is based on an observation you've made of the value of attending music events live. And for people who don't necessarily know what Sound City is, maybe just a quick explanation of what that is and how that experience has shaped your conception of this convention.
Well, I'll start with the second part of that. Yeah, Sound City is the UK's longest consecutively running music festival for new music in the UK. Now 18 years young, and it's the primary source for finding new music, not just for the UK music industry, but for the global music industry. So there's a business conference that runs through the center of it. Many of the world's people who work in the commercial music business around the world attend every year. And then part of that then is 300 of what we consider to be the hottest new bands or new artists playing the festival. And I guess over the years, we've showcased artists who were unknown at the time, artists like Adele, Ed Sheeran, Jungle, Florence and the Machine, many, many more, hundreds and hundreds more artists who played Sound City before they played anywhere else, really. And as a consequence, were discovered because of that. And you're right, I think the value of consuming music at the source it's made for us is a very, very important part. I think when we were living through COVID, we created a new platform called Guest House, and we actually did showcase something like a couple of thousand bands during the 2 years of COVID via those kind of online consumption methods, really. And at the time, it was a godsend, and at the time, it was praised for the work that we did for bringing music there. But we did feel that once we got back into the real world, there was a real energy for people to be in a room again with bands, with artists, with speakers, and rub shoulders with real people, really. Yeah. And so we just felt, that's always been our core business. That's what we're good at. It's what we're known for. And so we just decided, that's kind of the way we go forward, really. There are companies that specialize still in online things, but it's not something that we do personally.
Yeah. So you're bringing the world to Liverpool for this convention, and it really is an international convention. And what are you hoping that people take away from their experience in the city outside of the convention? Why will they want to come back, um, uh, not just for a Bowie convention?
I think if you talk specifically about Liverpool, I think once Liverpool is one of the greatest secrets on this planet, really. I think when people come to Liverpool, I think the welcome that they get in terms of the people and the experience of the city itself is second to none, really. And I really do mean second to none. I spend most of my time traveling around this planet that we live on and going to most of the major cities, from LA to New York, Hong Kong, Beijing, Seoul, Tokyo, and so on. And I'll sound biased, but I'm not. I would argue Liverpool is probably one of the greatest cities and probably one of the top three music cities on this planet. And that doesn't mean just looking backwards. That doesn't mean just the Beatles. I mean, in terms of the way it shaped the future of music as well. And I think when you take into account Liverpool and Manchester, because we're very close neighbours, Manchester's 30 miles down the road. If you look at the musical output of Liverpool and Manchester combined, it's punching way above New York, it's punching way above LA, it's punching way above Tokyo or any other city on this planet, really. Considering the size of those two cities is 2.5 million. It's the per capita punching way above any other cities on this planet. So I think if you're a fan of music and you're a fan of culture and you like edgy cities, I think Liverpool is a place to fall in love with. So not least for the Bowie convention, I think as a destination point, it's a great place to come to. But having said that, part of the story of Bowie is that we move it around. We were in New York last year. Who knows where we'll be next year?
Yeah, I was going to ask. Yeah, I was going to ask.
Yeah.
Hey, if you want to come to Albany, New York, I can help.
I'll bear that in mind.
So
get the city to support us.
So somebody's watching this interview that we're doing right now and didn't know about the convention and wants to come. What do they need to do? How late can they sign up to come? Is there a point at which you sell out of tickets, that there's a capacity that's reached?
Yes, of course there is, and it's reaching that point now. To be fair, we've probably been about 80% for the last couple of months, so 80% sold out. Like with anything, the last few weeks of any event, any festival, when it's at that point, what we call the people late to the party will get their tickets, and then we always end up with a waiting list. We did in New York last year, we did in Liverpool in year one. So I would argue if people want to come along, then they should run their flag up the flagpole sooner rather than later, really, and show their interest. One of the things that we've done this year in response to listening to our audience is that we've done day tickets this year, and we have done tickets that just allow people to come to the Bowie Ball. So, for example, we can fit more people in the Bowie Ball than we can in the convention. So the convention's likely to sell out before the Bowie Ball would sell out, just because of the numbers permitting. So if you want to come to the whole event, I would argue get your tickets sooner rather than later.
Great. And I was going to ask, but you said if we can't, like I can't make it this year, which I'm very, very upset about. You are planning to do this in the future.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, this is our third one of many. Yes.
Yeah. So I'm just going to ask a couple wrap-up questions, but I wanted to get a little more personal in terms of, the three of us are grown men who spend a lot of time thinking about David Bowie. And just open-ended question, why? What has his legacy meant to the both of you?
For me, I've worked in music all of my life. So I'm 40 years now of being involved in the professional music business, from being in bands and signed, major record deals, through to running festivals, managing artists, running record labels, and so on. My love affair with music started with David Bowie, so I have so much for him to thank for him for, really. It was my babysitter at the tender age of 11 that used to bombard me. Was this otherworldly creature that would come to my home dressed as Ziggy Stardust. And, you know, at that time, I had no real passion or interest in any music beyond what my parents were playing in the house, really, you know. And then this guy would come around with his girlfriend and play all this music that exposed me, you know, to this other world that I'd never even knew existed. So that started a lifelong love affair with Bowie. But as importantly as with Bowie, my introduction to the world of music where I was choosing it on my own terms, really, and beginning to define and understand what turned me on and what made me excited about the world of rock and roll.
Yeah. Alan, what do you think?
Yeah, it's an interesting one because it's almost like it's like a datum. You know, you sort of we all go through this day-to-day life, but then every now and then you need like a reset. And part of that reset for me through my life has always been that I've just found that comfort zone by being able to sit myself down on my own, put on Diamond Dogs, Scary Monsters, and just take you back to being younger and having those incredible feelings of some of those sounds that were coming out of the speakers and switching that onto another album and having that moment of crikey, this is that same guy. How has he done this soul album? Whereas a minute ago I was listening to something that was just so far more electronic and, you know, out there. And so just think it's helped me realize that you can swap and change if you're having a down day. There's as a fan, you know, you start to find that I've always said that, I know it sounds daft, but it almost feels to me that Bowie's always been there to sort of like almost help hold your hands through situations. We have highs and we have lows. And it's almost been like he's just been there to get you through those harder times. Those kids in those early 70s, you know, with Bowie looking down the camera, you know, singing Starman and feeling that he was speaking to them. It gave them a direction. It made them realize that some of those thoughts they were having in their head weren't wrong. And I think as we go through life, it's just nice to know that we've got that thing that is David Bowie that enables us to just remember where we came from, where we've been, have those little moments of, wow, you know, listen to that. I remember I was doing this. But not just his music, I think as well, the way he was as a human being and the way that he treated others, the way he spoke with others and helped others and listened. And, you know, you speak to musicians that, like, for example, Kevin Armstrong, he approached me when I went to one of his most recent Lust for Life gigs. And it was the way he approached me and spoke to me. And I just instantly thought that is what David would have done. He would have approached, he would have spoke, he would have made you feel very special for the time and effort that you'd put into just being a fan. And I think that's why now it's important these younger fans that are coming through, they've got a lot to learn, but not for 1 minute would, especially on Bowie Fascination or with the convention, we would not make them feel that they were catching up. They were there, they're there to enjoy, and they're not going to be made to feel like they're second best. It's important, and they'll have their own memories, and they'll find their little datum where they can go to and you know, enjoy listening to his music and getting whatever meaning out of it that they get out of it. We're all completely different. We'll all have our own thing, but he's certainly made a huge mark on all of us, and I think that's why the convention is so special, because it's that one opportunity. We all get together, we all get to sit, listen to some of these guys that work with David, and then we all get to have a drink together, and we all get to party together. And it's a special event for that reason.
So, two final questions, and Alan, you set the second to last one up. So you go to the convention, you meet these people, you have exposure to people that work with Bowie, authors, musicians, other fans. You get a sense of community, and you want to continue that. You want to continue the dialogue. You want to continue having exposure. And one of the ways to do that is through Bowie Fascination. And so if there's a good chance that if you're watching this, you know what Bowie Fascination is. But in case you don't, Alan, what is it, and how could somebody engage with Bowie Fascination?
Well, Bowie Fascination, and David was saying then about lockdown, was another moment of what do I do? I've been on a lot of Bowie socials, and you watch all the videos and the photos and commenting, and to me, there felt like there was a lot of fans wanting to be seen as knowing more than the next, and that's absolutely fine. But I think what comes with that then is acknowledging that someone can feel quite demoralised pretty quickly. So Bowie Fascination is all about inclusivity. It's making sure that everyone feels like they've got a safe place to go to. They can learn, they can share, and we love to encourage the sharing. We want to know the stories. Who was there at the Hammersmith Odeon in '73? Tell us your story, because you know, it was recorded, but what's your story? And then the same in, you know, '78 on the Isola 2 tour. So Bowie Fascination, we try and make sure that everybody's got that safe place to go to. We moderate it well. We've got the moderators. It's a great team of moderators that we have. And anything we see we're not happy with, we'll step in, but not on the boss, you need to listen. We'll try and make sure that we can work with them. We don't want to just say you're out, because there's no point. We all have a bad day. So maybe they've said something because they're in a bad mood, and let's work with them, and then let's hope we can put a smile on their face when they go to bed that night. And there's a lot of people out there that live on their own, and we do specifically work in a way that's to try and bring Bowie Fascination to their homes, to enable them to feel like they've got a family. And what's so nice is that we've got a lot of members now that are meeting up, who are traveling abroad, and they're stopping at their houses. And that's because they've met at Bowie Fascination, and we've given them the opportunity to develop those friendships. And what's so good about that is we've now spilt into the family of the convention, and it's given us that opportunity to work with Dave and his team, and we'll be present at the event. I've got, I think, two admin and two of the moderators who will be attending as well, helping out, enjoying it, being amongst the attendees, helping direct where they need to be or what information they need. And it's to offer, again, that more peaceful approach, rather than you didn't know that Kevin Armstrong played on Absolute Beginners. It's not that. You know, we try and do it in a very subtle way to hopefully be there to help them learn every step of the way, and continue to move forward as Bowie Fascination, which ultimately is a place where we don't do drama. I personally don't like drama, and so therefore Bowie Fascination doesn't do drama, and we offer that place to come and just enjoy for the right reasons.
Well, thank you, and thank you for facilitating that, and thanks to the both of you for putting this convention together. Final question. I'm going to put you on the spot with the question I ask everybody. What's your favorite Bowie song and album?
Who's going to get longer to think about this one? Is it Dave or me?
Well, it depends what day of the week it is, doesn't it? It depends what mood you're in, you know, because as Alan said, the journey that Bowie takes us on, you know, life only makes sense when you look backwards, and certainly Bowie's career only makes sense when you look backwards, really, because at the time it didn't make sense to him or to the fan base, really. I don't think, you know, to jump as he did with his music and the experiments that he was taking. But today, you know, if you were asking me today, what's my favorite album, as it invariably is, it would be Young Americans for me. You know, I love that flirtation with the white soul boy thing. I love the look. I love the clothes. I love the hair. You know, everything about that period really was great. And I think what's made it resonate even more for me is because I've become very close friends with people like Robin Clark and with Carlos Alomar over the past few years. And so now knowing them in the personal way that I do know them has made that album come to life even more for me. And I would argue, not just me, I think anybody that's come to the convention, when they hear the stories about how that album was made and about how they all met, and the whole story about Luther Vandross hearing that firsthand and so on, just makes you see it more. And you begin to understand what a happy accident it was, many of the things that happened. There was no grand plan. It just unfolded that way, and David just allowed people to be themselves, really, and was more just the wizard in the room as opposed to any kind of someone with a grand plan. So for me, you know, would be Young Americans. And if I was going to pull pull a track, it probably somebody up there likes me. You know?
Oh, we could have a whole other show just on that song.
Yeah.
And the great thing is, of course, is that with having Carlos there and Ava Cherry there, we will be getting a nice insight into the recording of Young Americans in our Sigma Studio session that we'll be putting on with a guy called Chris Carter, very knowledgeable of that whole era. He'll be moderating that panel, so that sort of links up quite nicely to get that in. And Ava on the Bowie Ball will be performing. She'll be up on the stage as she thoroughly enjoys doing. And she's got one of her guests who've coming over from the Netherlands, Rias, who has been sharing some of his recordings. He's been performing over in the Netherlands, and now he gets the opportunity to sort of get on stage and do a couple of songs with Ava as well. In terms of my favourite, again, it's on the spot really. I tend to sort of go between. I don't think there can be a favourite personally, but on today, tricky. Station to Station, I adore, and it's always one of my go-to albums. I love the whole Thin White Duke sort of, the imagery of it, the mystery behind him and his mindset at that time, of which he says that he doesn't remember recording a lot of it. I think that's an excuse, but Station to Station is certainly well up there, and I'm a huge fan of Lodger.
Yeah,
it's coming up. It's coming up through the ranks with a lot of Bowie fans. Yeah, it's one that's hitting home with some really remarkable songs. But you've got me on the song. Secret Life of Arabia is undoubtedly one of my favourite tracks. Yeah. But then again, I could probably list about another 10.
Yeah, I know. Everybody would give a different answer any other day. So would I. But I just like to.
Yeah.
So, guys, thank you. Alan, David, thank you very much for joining me today. Thank you for putting this convention on. If you are seeing this interview before July 26th, there might still be an opportunity to get a ticket. If you're seeing it after, spend 10 seconds on Google to find out about the 2025 convention, because I'm going to be I'm going to be trying to make my reservation so I don't have another scheduling conflict. So hey, maybe there's a reason to come to Philadelphia. So 50th anniversary of Young Americans. But
indeed, yes.
Yeah. So this has really been a delight. You put a lot of smiles on my face just talking about the topic, and good luck with the convention. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, John. Cheers, Alan.
Thank you. Cheers.
Bye now.